Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Gaines, and Ed Mann.
Hello, sweet world, and welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe. We've got a two-man pod today, well, this afternoon. It's a lovely sunny day on a Tuesday in spring. I think it's summer now. We can call it summer now, I guess.
Oh, wow. You've made it awkward because you've really put me on the spot. I have no idea when summer technically
I know, that's what I was trying to... Is it when British Standard? I don't know. So, yeah, anyway. I know
Is there a date time function that you can call to check?
I think there's one in Java, but obviously there's a new one, actually, in Java
topical.
8. New one in Java 8. They've cleaned up the API. That actually is a pretty good segue into what we're actually going to be talking about today. It's just, firstly, I should probably say it's me, Ed. You can probably know my voice. And we've got Mickey B. He's just waved. It's just us two, so it's going to be very weird.
It's been a while since it's been just the two of us.
Just the two of us. There's a song that we probably should sing. He's wearing an awesome t-shirt that I think we may have to get a screenshot of and put in the show notes. But
hey, at least I'm not naked this time. I mean,
that's true. Phil did love it. Oh dear.
He did. Big supporter of the nudity thing. Yeah.
He was either that or he was very scared, so he thought he'd go along with it just to make sure you never actually tried to hug him or anything.
I have to say, man, I enjoyed your podcast the other day.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't there, but whatever. No. I think I say "oh dear" a lot, like in a really weird. Oh dear! I've already said it like 3 times now.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I understood maybe half of it, but your mate Paul. Right?
Yeah, Paul. What about him?
Clever guy. Knows what he's talking.
I know. I've been trying to convince him to come on. Fortunately, he did, and actually, I think he's actually up for doing a couple more. So we'll try and nail him down.
I like the fact that he spends most of his spare time just slagging off my brown website.
It does seem like even today there was he tweeted me the Wayback Machine. I was like, you have to tweet that to Mickey. So for the listeners, Mickey has updated his website because of the barrage of abuse that had gone his way since Joe mentioned the brown website. And obviously Paul has carried on this barrage of abuse. No, it wasn't really. I think it was more the fact that you're such a good designer. The irony of it, But how is your design going, actually?
Well, you need to message Jason because I think he said he's going to get something to me, but I've not had any figures yet. But
I see, slackers. These designers, these designers are just slackers.
I'm hoping you'll get to meet him on Thursday at the big meetup.
I know. I'm looking. Well, we're not sure when this is actually going to be released, but
yes, good point. Good point.
What Thursday is it? It's Thursday the 19th.
Yes.
In Maidstone. So either it'll be, I don't think it'll be before, but afterwards, we can now say already sorry, probably, for what Ed did when he was drunk. He shouldn't have taken off his clothes. And
I imagine you'll get some fight over PHP.
There will
knock
be
someone out.
classic ASP. There'll be some weird dynamic, static languages. Undoubtedly, there'll be that. Then there'll be the WordPress because you know how much you love WordPress and e-commerce platforms like Magento. So it's going to be very interesting. And also the England game's on. So hopefully the 3 Lions are doing well, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I mean this could be very weird because we're actually going to release this podcast at some unknown time. We thought we'd get a few recorded so that if there's any weeks we can't do, that we'll have something to fall back on. So it might be that this is released in 2017 or something. And
I'm actually pegging on that because we are so good, each week at being able to.
This show matures with time. I think.
It's
like a fine wine. But I would say to everyone, come along to the big meetup, but we don't know when this is going to go out. So
I hope you did come along, and if you didn't, you suck.
Exactly, yeah.
But so I suppose probably best not to go into how's your week been, because seeing as we're probably going to do another podcast tomorrow, which is one going to be released tomorrow. So
very true. Can I just mention one thing though, which I don't think will matter whether it's mentioned now or in 2020? Sir. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I know you've had a little bit of experience. I don't know recently, but kind of open source media players. I've never really found one that I thought was brilliantly done. Like
there doesn't seem to be the de facto, does there? There's a couple that people always mention, but not one that I've had that before. Because we had that, didn't we, in that project we were working on together, where we had to kind of
Yeah. I just feel like they kind of fall down a bit with documentation. Like, I'm not saying that the plugins themselves are bad. I think they're pretty good, but for me, like, I've not found one where I thought, oh, this documentation is amazing, really good. But again, kind of thing, if anyone has got something they would recommend to me, please let me know. Obviously not JPlayer, because I've played with JPlayer. And
you've got JPlayer currently on your site, haven't you?
Yeah, and again, it's really good. I have no complaints, but like a couple of things that I did, like, I didn't end up finding out how to do it for the documentation. I just kind of had to look under the hood and do certain things.
There you go. Hey, isn't the source meant to be documentation, though? And all that, the PHP core. PHP core, source is the documentation. I think that was Ben Ramsey, wasn't it? I kind of half agree with it, but I was thinking, you do need higher level documentation.
Yes, I agree. But I did like your quote today, though, which I then tweeted. Was it, every language has the capability of being evil?
Yeah, every programming language can be used for evil.
That's it, yeah.
It is so true, though, because it's interesting to see, like, and this is, again, topical with, a lot of people hate on PHP, and we go into that every week pretty much when there's another, they hate on it, blah, blah, blah. You think to yourself, so what you're going to do is you're going to start off in PHP, and then you're going to run away to a real language, in quotes. Or something. But really, it's not the language that's the problem, like, not the language that defines what you do. I mean, of course, there are specific languages that are better for certain things and stuff. But it's how you use it, I mean, in any language you can do unit testing, really. If you do it well, it'll be a nicer code base to look at. So, so say like even if you're working in something, say like Scala, I really want to work on a Scala project, that makes me clever, in quotes, or Clojure, or Erlang. Well, you can write bad code in all these languages. I know it may be harder in certain languages to write worse code, but...
Yes. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because I had a very similar conversation with a colleague at lunch today, and you're absolutely right that, any language can produce horrific code, given, the right programmer or the wrong programmer. But I guess there's certain languages that lend themselves to producing better code. I mean, you always make the point about, the being forced to conform to standards with Python, which, I can't really disagree with, because I've not done enough of stuff in Python. But I was saying to a guy today, he was like, oh, should I learn PHP first? Should I learn Java first? And I was like, well, I would learn Java first, because I think you'll pick up less bad habits. But I appreciate that, to someone like, Phil Sturgeon, who we had on the other week, and, and like we always gone about PHP the right way. Well, if you learn PHP the right way, then there's no reason to pick up those bad habits. But left to your own devices, I think you could go down a bad path potentially, I think.
Absolutely.
But I guess you could do Java.
Old school, and that's the thing. Like, you can write bad Java code and bad CSharp code and bad, other code. It's like, it's how it's what you employ. It's yourself, your own disciplines and stuff.
I guess I was going to say, maybe for me with Java, there's a lot more things that kind of the compiler will stop you from doing certain bad things, But then you've got things that throw exceptions in PHP where you have to make sure you're dealing with it.
I think with like Java, we're going to go into this, like with Java and like C#, because they are primarily an object-oriented language. Everything is based 100% on being OO.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a wrong or right thing. I do think more of it as being more of a not wrong to kind of assume that we always need to use OO. And I think, because we had Phil on last week and he was talking about, that there's a lot of negativity in the PHP core to OO kind of principles, like bringing that in, like we don't want to be the next Java. I don't think of it like that. I think of it the right tool for the job. Sometimes a script, is great. Sometimes functions are great. Sometimes, a functional way is a good way to do it, tackling it in that way. And I do like the way that Python and PHP do it, where you are able just to make simple scripts, but you are also able to make classes, and, build up namespaces and stuff like that. So I think kind of gives you the best of both worlds in that. And I think also Scala does that as well, where it has a scripting side of it as well, where you can just write simple scripts. But we're kind of diverging on that. I suppose,
we are.
So
that
listeners,
hit our main topic?
We are, Sorry. So listeners, me and Mickey thought to ourselves, why not, just have a little discussion about Java and C#. And pretty much ramble for a bit.
I should probably explain as well, for anyone who doesn't know me or has listened to this podcast before, that basically I instantly hate anything that I don't understand or have never played with before.
It's called the Mickey effect or the Mickey principle.
It's basically the northerner in me.
I hate you. I hate everything about you. And I can't believe you've made me do this.
So naturally, CSharp.net I hate because I've never used it, and that's completely justified.
Completely justified. And I'm going to try and convince him.
That'll be the format of the podcast, I think. So
Mickey hates C#.
Yes, that should be the title.
The sequel, Mickey. Oh god, that would be good for SEO, you know.
Yeah,
the haters,
absolutely.
You know. Oh dear. Anywho, but yes, so Mickey, let's talk. So the listeners do know, you know, that you've obviously doing a master's course, and this is probably your first foray into Java.
Yeah.
How
absolutely.
has this year been with Java? How have you enjoyed it? And because I suppose primarily your PHP background.
Yeah. I mean, that was the only real language I really knew, and then, you know, classic ASP like Lou as well, I guess. So I think I started learning Java a little bit before I started my masters. I was doing a little bit with you. We kind of went through a book together, and again, like really frustrating at the beginning trying to understand things, and I guess the first thing I would pick out is, you know, when you've got this kind of thing like string cheese equals new string, you think, what? Why? It just makes no sense. Why would I need to do that? It's just, and then you think, it'd be so much nicer in PHP. But actually, over time, I've grown to really love that kind of format. It's just so strict, and you know exactly what's going on. I don't know. It's just, I guess it seems like overkill to some, but to me, I think more strictness the better, actually. And like you say, I've been doing my masters for a year now, and pretty much everything I've done has been in Java. So,
they're very much a Java shop, though, aren't they? At the Uni of Kent, J and stuff. So
it's just like the universal language of programming, isn't it? It's like English, and you know,
it's like a business side. I mean, the universal programming in English is Lisp. I mean, that's the business. No, I don't mind Lisp. I like Closure. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Lisp people. Your dialects are lovely.
So no, I mean, as you know, I was banging about Java, but again, it's only because it's one of the few languages that I know. So naturally, now I know it, I do love it.
So for the audience, what is Java like at a fundamental level?
Oh,
I'll put you on the spot there, haven't I?
You really have, yeah. It's so with PHP, obviously, it's a scripting language that basically gets interpreted when it's executed. With Java, you've got it's a compiled language that basically you write your code and then you compile it, and it compiles onto machine code, byte code, whatever you want to call it.
It's a statically typed language, isn't it? You know, where in case of PHP, it's dynamic, where with the difference between static and dynamic is when you define, say we've got a string, as you were talking about, you know, and we say you define that this variable is a string, and for its whole life, it will always be a string. So the data type is actually on the variable, and then you put inside there, obviously, the string itself. With a dynamic language, variables don't actually have a type associated with it. It's the actual value itself as the type, which allows you then to say, instead, you know, like maybe we've got foo equal cheese, you know, string foo equal cheese in Java, saying like that foo, you know, the foo variable is a string, and it always will be a string. So you can only put in strings in that. Or in the language like PHP, foo's just a variable where you can chuck in any data types. You could put in cheese, you could put in one, you could put in anything you like, because the actual data type is stored with the value instead of it being stored in the variable.
True.
At like an underlining kind of sad level. And as you're saying, like it's the nice thing, Java came around in the 90s. Actually, finally, I remember this from when I was back at uni. It came around because they wanted to make a language for for TVs or something, set-top boxes, something online. That was initially kind of where it wanted to go. That's weird. Yeah. And the idea was they wanted to make a language that there was C, there's C++. They wanted to make a language that didn't, hinder the developer, so you didn't have the common pitfalls that happened in all those languages, such as memory issues and allocation and stuff like that. And, like being able to run it anywhere. I mean, the whole idea with Java's thing, which didn't really work out, but was write once, run everywhere, run anywhere. And that, as you were talking about bytecode, is where it comes from with the JVM the Java virtual machine. So that the way they go about that is that you write your code in Java, you use the Java compiler, that compiles it down to an intermediate code called bytecode. And that isn't dependent on any platform, but it's dependent on the JVM, and then the JVM runs that bytecode and then converts it into the instruction set for your specific system. And that's a great way of doing it, because then you're able to run an application. In theory, there's a couple of differences, but they're not really differences, but stuff like GUI stuff that you need to take into consideration. But, you can run it. I can write something on the Mac OS X, and then, Paul could run it on his Linux box, and then Mickey could run it on his Windows box, because he's a Windows guy. But yeah, so that's kind of like, so it's static, it's object orientated at a fundamental level, whereby you can't actually run anything without it being an object.
What about primitives? Are they still objects?
No. So what I mean, is you can't just write a script.
Okay,
all right. It has to be in an object, and you have to create a new instance of it, and all that funky stuff, and it has to have a main and all that. But yeah, that actually moves on well. So that's Java, and it was all the buzz in the 90s because it was a great idea, isn't it? This idea that we're going to save developers from having all these pitfalls, and actually there before that, funny enough, there was other times when they wanted to make like virtual machines languages in the 80s, but the machines, the actual computer machines at that time just weren't powerful enough to deal with that kind of extra layer. So in the 90s was the time when Java came about, and it was able to. The machines that we were building and running on were able to actually handle this extra layer with the virtual machine.
So why did Java pick off so well when people often talk about how much they love Erlang now, and that's been around since like the 70s or something?
Yes.
And now it's becoming really popular again now.
So I think Java is specifically aimed at businesses and corporate systems, and that kind of domain. Where and I think that's kind of the direction C++ kind of goes in as well, but that's more kind of high performance things. Where C is very generic, Java is they call it a general programming language, but the domain and the problems you're solving normally are business orientated. And stuff like Erlang came around, I think it was the 80s, with Ericsson, wasn't it? I think they built that, built the system. Yeah. And nowadays it's coming very popular because of the fact that we're distributing, and like your parallel, course that you've done, that distribution, we can't vertically scale anymore. We have to horizontally do it. We've reached that, Moore's law and all that funky stuff. So we have to kind of spread out our performance and everything now. So yeah, that's then coming into play, and immutability and functional stuff and that kind of fun jazz. But I think the JVM is one of those things which is just beautiful machine. I think there's a couple, and I can't remember the article, so this could be just hearsay, but I remember reading somewhere where someone was able to write code in C, straight C, and also write code in the JVM, but the JVM outperformed straight C.
Wow.
And I think that's to do with because the JVM's able to do stuff. That's another thing, garbage collection. So the garbage collection was one of the great things about the JVM, and so that's another thing to probably say is we kind of say JVM and Java, and we mix them up, and we kind of assume that they're the same thing. Are they the same thing, though, Mickey?
The Java virtual machine and Java? No.
So what are the differences? Where can you say where Java starts and where the JVM starts?
So Java is the language, and the virtual machine is.
The runtime, pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry about this. I'm just
fine.
I just chuck you these things. I'm like,
it's fine. I actually just feel a bit out of practice because I haven't actually programmed in Java for probably 2-3 months now since my last coursework.
Secretly a PHP lover and a Java hater.
It's amazingly how quick you can actually forget things like syntactically, actually. But exactly. I think you just nailed it with your description there.
Yeah, so the Java is the language, and then the JVM is what it actually runs the bytecode. And the great thing about that separation, though, is then it allows for competition in the language space, because you're going to have other languages that run on the JVM, such as Scala and Clojure.
The JVM that basically allows, like what you were talking about before, is like code once and run anywhere, basically.
That's it. Absolutely. Once it's in bytecode, there's a load of languages that once you write in once it's a bytecode, then it's interpreted by the JVM.
In fact, I think I've seen a good diagram before where it's like almost like an onion diagram where you've got like the OS and then the JVM sits on top of the OS and basically kind of does the communication between the two, basically.
Oh, that's cool. I'll definitely try and put that in the show notes.
I'll have a dig through because I've probably got it in my lecture notes somewhere. But Yeah, but it's very cool. I mean, as you well know, one of the guys who's one of my lecturers, he's, I think really involved in the garbage collection side of things.
The king of garbage collection.
Yeah, exactly. So, quite lucky to have him at Kent.
Which is a very cool topic in itself, actually, because obviously garbage collection then allows you to be a little bit more haphazardness with you shouldn't be haphazard, you should still care about memory allocation and stuff, but it allows you to kind of take again, focusing on the business problem, which is what you care about. Obviously, if you're going to want performant applications, you can use the JVM. It's still very good, but you're going to have to do it in a certain way. But also, then you're probably going to go down into lower languages such as C and C++ to still solve those problems.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm, show myself as a complete noob here, but obviously, as someone who's not really programmed in C much, I take it that's the kind of thing you have to take care of yourself. If you're programming in C, you have to make sure you do all the memory cleanup and all the rest.
Memory allocation, it's everything you allocate on the heap, you have to then get rid of and stuff like that. That must make debugging a nightmare. That's when you get your kind of you get your memory out and stuff, so you kind of go into other people's memory accidentally and stuff like that, overflow and stuff. So a lot of these problems happen, and that's because, again, I think one thing I had when I was starting to program was I didn't start off with, I started off with Pascal and Delphi, which were quite high level, and also then Java. And then I was looking at C and I'm like, I'm not a real programmer because I don't code in C, And then you look at C and you're like, well, actually I understand that as well. And all these languages have a reason for being. Like, there's a reason why Java's around and it's a higher level. There's like people mock you saying, "Oh, you can't deal with it without a garbage collection." But then if you think about it, like, well, if you wanted to write the same bit of code in straight C, it will be unwieldy and ridiculous. There's a reason why you want to use something like Java, because you're able to tackle that problem, which is as complex in different areas, but in a better way. But sorry.
Oh no, sorry. I was just going to say, just going back to something we were just talking about 5 minutes ago. I was trying to think of the word. It was really embarrassing. But we were talking about static and dynamic data types. And because really, I'm thinking of something like a polymorphic variable, say like human, and then a farmer is a human and blah, blah, blah. I was, kind of in my lectures taught, they're dynamic variables because they can be of multiple types. And obviously polymorphism means of many types or something like that, doesn't it? I guess that's a little bit confusing, I guess, but I know exactly what you're saying, but
I suppose it. So what that means is that so you're going to have in the C# world, I suppose actually, you have something called value types, they're called primitives in Java, and you have reference types, which are like your objects, and objects. So really, there's only one type called object, really. Well, it's not really, because they're abstract data types afterwards with human and stuff like that. But in essence, say that I want a human, then that's an interface. Or not an interface, more like that's a base class. And then, I've got Bob, and he equals actually, an admin user. Why would have a human admin user? Now, he that still works, and he's still actually an admin user, but you only, the projected view of him. I like that view of calling it. There was a video series I listened to, and it was like a cool way of thinking about it. Think about like that when you're saying that I want to be a look at me as a human. That is the projected view of you at that time. So you're still the same thing, but you only show yourself as being human at that time. Yeah. So then, of course, if you go into another data type and you say now you want to now assign what was my admin user. Who's now human, but then put him back into an admin user, you can, but you have to use casting and all that horrible stuff, which no one likes at all. Sorry. Yeah, so that's Java.
Yes. Did you want to, I know you often slag off Java and you always refer to autoboxing. Did you want to talk about why you hate that?
So, no,
unjustly,
I haven't got hate for that. It's not also, that's just, obviously something, because that's what C# does as well. But so I did Java 3 years at university and stuff, and I it's a great language, and it is, the JVM platform's great. But then I looked at like Scala, and I do feel that they've had the opportunity to correct bits that were wrong in Java. So you know what I mean. Like Scala comes along, and they almost have a unified type system. So that's actually the first thing I'd like to talk about. So so C# is another, like, we're kind of very going, crazy here, but it's good to have a little rant. It's fun to have a little rant.
Segueing all over the place.
C# is almost, you could kind of look at it as a like for like replacement as Java. Almost like they are kind of trying to compete with the same thing. They're trying to solve
the legal battles and stuff.
They're trying to solve the same problem. Obviously, one's really from Microsoft, though it is open source and it's an ECMA standard. So there is open source bits to it, like the compiler's now open source and stuff. So they are being nicer about that. And then you've got Java, which obviously is always open source, but it's now owned by Oracle, and no one likes Oracle. Just
they're going to be our sponsor.
Oh, yeah. Man.
Take it easy. Stop slagging off big corporate companies.
Yeah, Microsoft sucks. Google, you suck.
Won't be working for them in the future.
I know, there goes my career. So they're kind of, you can think of them. And C#, there is a reason why it's called C#. Now, do you know why it's called C#?
Oh, I know it wasn't its original name, but I don't know why it's called C#. No,
you come from from a musical background, so you know obviously C#.
Sharp and flat, yeah.
The actual
C because it's part of the C family kind of syntax.
But then so it's a clever thing. If you actually look at C#, so you know the way that the sharp symbol actually is like. So we use a hash symbol sometimes to it, but if you have the actual legit, well, actually both of them, but you can see that it's actually plus 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 plus. If you cut up the hash.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't know whether it's actually a reason why they did that, but yeah, it's quite a cool way to look at it. So it's actually C+++++, so it's double the fun.
I never knew that. Wow.
That's quite
amazing.
a cool little thing, isn't it? Yeah. So C#, which can, again, be a pain to Google sometimes because obviously they have to use a hash instead. So sometimes you call it with the actual name sharp, or sometimes you do with the hash, or sometimes you do it with the actual, the C# sign, or the sharp sign, sorry. But anyway, I diverge. So they do the exact same thing. Instead of JVM, C# code or C# runs on the .NET framework or platform using the Common Language Runtime. They use interpreter. They use their own CLI. That's an infrastructure for it, but it's interpreted code like bytecode, similar to that. And they have other languages on their platform. You can get, you can do VB.NET. You can do F#. Those are languages that are actually owned by Microsoft.
F#, is that a functional language?
Yeah, it's a very hardcore functional language. Pretty cool. And they're like run by good old Microsoft. So they're the big three. And then you have, but they really do go down kind of the C# route, being the .NET framework you want to use it for. I think we've kind of had a little bit of I've got a couple of things I'd like to talk about. Reasons why you should have a look into C#.
Well, my main issue, I know we've talked about this off air, but the main thing that will put me off, and I know you're going to say this isn't the case, but my main issue would be the setup process. I would kind of feel a bit like, oh man, what do I need to do? How hard is that?
So it is obviously a Microsoft product. So if you use a Windows machine, it's a lot easier to kind of do stuff. You've got Visual Studio. I mean, for free, you can get a Visual Studio Setup Express version and start playing around with it.
Yeah.
So it's not costing you big bucks. But there is a project called Mono, and that allows you to run up to, I think, 4.0 code. So the .NET framework up to 4.0 on Linux boxes or Mac OS X boxes. And there's actually there's a new thing called ASP.NET vNext, which is the idea that taking out only the bits that we care about for .NET for ASP.NET, and being able to package them up and actually run them on a Linux box or on a Mac OS X box as well.
I just kind of imagine that would be quite slow because
they've been able to I think cut it down to like 13 megabytes or something stupid. The bits that they only need, without all the other funky stuff that you need for like web forms and all this. Yeah, so it's quite.
So it runs quite smoothly then.
I think so. I haven't done it, but that's like their new initiative to try and make ASP.NET more relevant, which I think they should actually, because that's another thing. Like, I do like ASP.NET. I think they've got a win there. But
I remember a company we won't name, but somewhere we used to work, like they used to get like lots of free software, didn't they? Just for using Windows or Microsoft products, didn't they?
You're able to kind of join their like development kind of group thing, and kind of generics. So I don't know whether we should go into what a generic is, or we just assume that people know what a generic is. Like,
we should probably mention it, I guess.
So what is a generic?
You're going to put me on the spot, aren't you?
I know, this is the thing. I don't mean to.
I should have programmed in Java for like half an hour before I came on. Okay, so generics. Let's take an example in Java, probably the same in C#, but say you've got many types of objects that basically are a type of collection. You've got a collection class, and there's loads of other things that basically extend that, or mainly extend. And so you've got things like an ArrayList, which is very, very common. And I believe at once upon a time, like speaking to my good friend Nick McDowell about this and other people, that at once upon a time, an array list, you would just actually put in any type of objects that you wanted to.
Yeah, so the way it would work, it would assume that it's an object because the base type. So, damn it, we've completely gone off track with other things. But So
basically, it would allow anything that was of type object. Is that what you're
saying? Because you wouldn't have generic, because you wouldn't be able to specify. Because I think the idea, so it's about generalizing things.
Yes,
and it's actually taken from the functional world of, trying to reuse stuff, so as you were saying, like with your collection, like you have an array list.
Yes.
Now, if I want an array list of users, I would have to make a new array list, class, a actual concrete class of it to be able to do it. With generics, you're able to say, actually, here's a placeholder, use this when you want to create this instance.
Yeah.
You could, initially, I think up to, I don't know, it's 1.1 or something, you could it would be object always. So you would have to so you would actually cast it down to an object, assuming that you've just got an object in there, and then you'd have to cast it back.
Yeah, it's ingrained in my head because my mad German lecturer, I'm not implying that all Germans are mad, I'm just saying my mad German lecturer would always go on about, you've got this bucket and you put loads of dead hedgehogs in it, and then you would take out a dead every single week. Like his example was
I suppose you
dead
remember
hedgehogs.
You remember it, I suppose.
What is his hobby? What does this guy do? But yeah, no, it did serve purpose. So I'd never ever forget it.
Yeah,
and
scary.
have nightmares about it.
That's it. Yeah, for the wrong reasons. But generics came about to solve that problem of, look, we shouldn't have to always go down to the base class of being an object. We should be able to define, what I want in here, and you have compile time. So it was compile time checking as well, because obviously casting is a runtime thing where literally you're saying, don't worry about compiler, I know what I'm doing. So if you compile, say for instance, we have a users array list back in the day. Now I know, and we only want to have users in here.
Yes.
So how do you make sure that people don't only put users in there? Because there's not actually any compile time thing to say that. Because if everything's an object, everything is an object. Great, it goes by that command.
So I'm guessing defensive programming.
You could
type.
So you'd have what you'd normally do is have like a method that would check the instance type and then add it. Else it would throw an exception. But that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of user work, and it's a lot of runtime things. So what generics solved that problem by saying, look, here's a placeholder. When I want this user, and then at compile time and also at runtime, we'll make sure to make sure that you're actually still running.
Yeah, and I like generics. I'm quite happy with it. Especially, I mean, I don't reuse it, but diamond notation, right, which has made it a little bit cleaner to do.
In like Java 7, you can then not have to type. Yeah, because that's another thing with verbosity with Java and C#. Yeah. C# kind of gets away from it a little bit. But actually, there was an interesting thing with C# and Java that I know is that. So C# when it actually generates the generics, it actually generates the code. So when the class is loaded at runtime, it generates that actual code. But because Java does type erasure, so in the JVM, like it actually erases the types for some reason, which is really annoying. Like with languages like Java, with Scala, it gets a bit of pain.
I've got bitten by that. Yeah,
it's very annoying. So the Java methods loses the runtime information, so it needs to cast. So it actually does do the cast and has to do the check every time at runtime when you're doing it. So it's still doing the same thing, but it's doing it under the hood instead, which obviously hurts performance.
Yeah.
But that's like an implementation detail, really. I do like. I don't know why I don't like type erasure. I like the idea of still knowing what type it was, even after compiling. Yeah,
I must admit, I agree with that. To be honest with you, that sounds a much better way.
So, I think this is this part of the show is the bit that I'm going to mention: unified type system.
Tell me more.
So, Java's type system. Do you care to explain it? The differences between primitives and reference types and all that fun stuff.
Oh man, I think you've exhausted all my Java knowledge. So primitive types, pretty much the same as what we've talked about in other weeks. Things like integer, not to be confused with integer with a capital I. But yeah, integer in Java, string is not a primitive, so I can't say that. Boolean,
doubles,
I'm struggling it too.
That's right,
Double,
right. Yeah,
float,
doubles. You've got big, well, not big, but you've got these primitives which are ints, floats, those type things. And the thing about primitive types are, and they're called value types in C#, are that they're actually stored as is. They're stored actually on the stack or in the heap as is. I think actually on the stack more as is. So you're actually getting, with a reference type or an object, it's actually storing a pointer to an object.
Yeah.
And that's why I do like C#'s way of thinking of it. Like a value type has the value with it. A reference type is just it refers to something else. Yeah. So I like that kind of definition. And so that's got, and with Java, you can't actually create your own value types. Yeah. Or your own primitive types, because obviously they're primitive, Yeah. With good old C#, you can. You use something called a struct. You can actually make, like in C, you can actually make and build up your own ones. Right. And they all still go by the rule that they inherit from object. So technically, everything's an object in C#. So, sorry, I'm just struggling to conceptualize this, but so obviously, something like an array list in Java, you put something into the array list, but it's actually just storing a reference to that object in the array list. So so say you've got an array list, and that's stored. The array list is stored on the heap, and then obviously its link is also stored in the heap. Yes. Yeah. In C#. So in C#, it's the same thing, but what you can do is you can say, I want an array, like a fixed array, of say a data type that I want to make. Say we want a user data type or value type, and I want to make it a value type. I don't want to make it a actual class. I want to make it, because you use this for performance stuff. Yeah. Where, like having it there and then, you don't care about the fact that it's going to take up a bit of memory. You want it as quick as possible. Yeah. And then you can build up and compose this structure, maybe with a user, and they have a name. Or they don't have a name. Maybe they just have like an age or something like that, or a type. Yeah. And you can actually include methods. But then what that does is actually stores it there and then in that place, not a reference to it. Right. Okay. So it's a performance type thing. But it's quite a cool thing, because then it means if you make if you add anything to the object class, you can actually, then it affects all value types and reference types, which is pretty darn cool. But that's one thing I did when I first because I touched upon good old C# was, I was like, oh, that's quite cool that they actually did, and they solved that problem by making it look like that. Now, how do I then? So you can't with these languages, you can't actually store, say, in an array. So I want an array list. Can I store objects or reference types? Oh no, sorry. Can I store primitives in an array list? No, you cannot. No. Okay, so you'd have to cast it, right? No, because it comes to your lovely, lovely method. It would add it, but it would add it of the class type integer. So all the primitives have their own related. So integer is int. Yeah. And that's the object equivalent or the reference type equivalent of it. And autoboxing is like this kind of implicit conversion that happens, but it's quite similar, exactly the same to C# actually, where it's quite an expensive operation, because in a sense what you're doing is then creating from that primitive, you're having to make a reference type on the heap as well, that then has to, goes and does all its funky stuff. Probably just for a couple of methods or something. So it is quite a performant thing. Well, not a performant thing, but more of a degrading thing. But so that's autoboxing, and I do joke about it a lot with Mickey. But only because one thing I do like, Scala gets it right, where everything's an object, based from this value. It's called from this base again. But under the covers, how it deals with it with the JVM is it says, look, you're an integer. You'll be more performant as being a primitive integer. So it uses its intelligence to know that this should be a primitive integer instead of the actual integer or object. So, Java could get this as well if they wanted it. But it just chose to do autoboxing and weird stuff. Exceptions. Now, in Java, there's two types of exceptions, isn't there? There's checked and unchecked. Yeah. Runtime exceptions and So carefully for the users, the audience, because we did do an episode on. I'm just putting you on the spot all the time, aren't I? I've been really mean. No, not at all. I should know these things like the back of my hands, but I think my brain's just fried from a long year of studying.
Okay, so right, checked exceptions are ones that are checked at compilation time. Is that right? And basically, we'll go through your code and check that you're doing the right thing. So if you've got something that throws an exception, you'll be forced. Basically, you won't compile until you manage and that exception catch it. Basically,
can you give an example of an exception like that in Java?
Ooh, okay.
Maybe like IO exception. Like there's one, file not found kind of exceptions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's
or anything that actually inherits from exception or the base exception class is ones that are checked exceptions, meaning that you have to check them and make sure that for it to compile.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas something like a runtime exception, that's something that you can't really predict.
So a one like that would be like the divide by zero.
Yeah,
and that's an unchecked one where you don't have to specify. You could, if you wanted to, have it, handle it, but it doesn't. Yeah. The compiler doesn't complain to you.
Yeah.
If I was to tell you that CSharp doesn't actually have checked exceptions, everything's unchecked,
I wouldn't like that. Yeah, I like the strictness. I like having the policeman.
It is like C++ in that sense, where you don't have to specify. Because they're all unchecked. You can specify if you want, but it doesn't enforce you to have to do it. I agree with you, though. I think certain things you do want to be checked, like a file not found. And Oracle actually sums it up pretty good in Java's position. I've got a quote. It says, is if a client can reasonably be expected to recover from an exception, make it a checked exception. Stuff like, file not found. Okay, well, I use a default file, or just have a pop-up box saying, please, can you specify another file? But if a client cannot do anything to recover from an exception, make it unchecked, such as the divide by zero. It's like, well, we've divided by zero. We can't really do that. So bang. And they're the runtime ones.
Like one of my lecturers one time said, I think he was talking about, I can't remember what language he was talking about, but he was saying in this language, it was hard to get something to compile because the language is so strict. But it said the benefit of that is that when you do compile, you're so confident your program will run nicely.
And I think that's actually kind of one thing we both agree on, is that compiled languages are beautiful for that that extra step, the confirmation step with types, type theory, type category theory, all this fun stuff that we do. It allows you, it's like Haskell, like it's a pure language. It's a type, deals with types and type categories and type classes. But then, as you say, like you've got much more confidence in your code that once you've compiled it, you can be pretty certain that it's going to run the way you want it to run.
Yeah.
A lot more than interpreted, where you just have to pretty much, it's the whole REPL loop, isn't it? Read, evaluate, print loop, where you're just checking it all the time, kind of making sure it works that way. It's an extra step. There's one thing in Java 7 I don't know if you've used. It's called automatic resource management, and essentially
I was just looking at that. I've never heard of it.
And essentially, all that is like it's a try with resource block. So it allows you to say try.
Yes, I've seen this. Yeah.
So like try and then create a buffer reader or something.
Yeah.
Do something with it, and it will automatically dispose of it afterwards.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing that can be a pain, isn't it? You've got your try block, you open up this is before Java 7. So you open up the buffer reader.
Yeah.
You do some stuff. You have a catch saying, something goes wrong, do whatever you need to do for your debug, log it. And finally you have to close the stuff. A lot of people do sometimes forget. Bad practice is to forget to close stuff, even in languages that deal with all your memory management for you. You need to, with these resources, external resources, you do need to close them and stuff. So with this, it kind of provides that sugar on top where you can try and with this resource, and it will handle all the closing for you. I did actually find a library that now name escapes me. Oh, that's it. It's called projectlombok.org. And it actually provides like a couple of cool cool annotations. So annotations are similar to what we have in PHP. Well, we copied them from Java, which allow you to annotate the code using like Java doc type things, and being able to then pretty much rewrite the code or do certain things based on that. And what this allows then you to do is it allows you then to it provides you, it rewrites it, and then gives you like the try and the close block and everything like that, and provides you with a similar thing, but with versions older than Java 7. There is actually the similar thing came in before with C#, and they have the statement called using. Using. So it has using, and then it defines us in that scope. So when you're in those curly brackets, and then outside of that instance, it will be disposed. But inside, so you say using, and then you create, your file, or your file buffer reader type thing, and you do it that way. So it's a similar thing, and I like that a lot. There is, because I think there's also with in JavaScript, which people probably get confused with, and with was kind of this really, really, really bad idea that you could say with the object of user. This user, I don't want to do certain things quickly, so you wouldn't have to keep, saying user dot, blah, 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 user dot. That was a bad idea, so don't get those two confused. But yeah, so that is our good old automatic resource management. Anything you want to mention in the Java world?
Well, not Java actually, but I'd like to segue slightly, if that's okay, because obviously I've not played with C# .NET, but obviously one of the things that I probably would be quite curious about, and obviously I've mentioned before, I'm quite a big fan of the .NET podcast. I think those guys are great, but also they quite sometimes mention things in Visual Basic, not Visual Basic. What am I talking about?
Oh, Visual Studio.
Visual Studio. Thank you. Yeah, that was quite a faux pas. They talk about the tools that you've got on there that help you, and I mean, I'd be quite envious of that. I mean, how would you rate that, and what does it give you?
It gives you, because they define the whole stack in essence, they really can give you all the tools that you're going to need. In the Java world, everything's quite, kind of spread out, where you've got like Eclipse, you've got NetBeans, you've got JetBrains, and stuff like that. Really in like this .NET world, Visual Studio is king. So it has everything you need really to start off, and then kind of you progress through it and everything. I found with the IDE, it's a really good IDE. There's a couple of extras as well, like JetBrains do a, JetBrains? Yeah, JetBrains is the company.
Yeah.
And then it's, so it's called ReSharper, which is kind of like a profile, like debugger for Visual, adds on to .NET framework and everything, which is quite cool.
See, in my mind, it kind of, I think of it as like this really bloated piece of software, almost like Dreamweaver, and you're kind of like programming in like Design View or something. It's not like
it's that. Not. It's so awesome.
Right.
You will, when you start using it, you do kind of really wish that everything was like this, because it just works so well. Yeah, it is really lovely piece of software.
It doesn't take any of the skill away from the programmer.
No, well, I mean, I suppose you could say it helps, as IDEs do. I think another thing people have is like, if you use an IDE, you're not really a geek. It's like, well, I know enough. So I know how to do it in a text editor. I just want to do it easier and make my life easier. Because again, I'm trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
That's bigger than another smaller problems I've been doing. Like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it definitely helps a lot. And obviously then they have this whole it integrates really well with the entity framework and stuff like that, which is their own object relational mapper.
Yeah.
And then they're able to do stuff like, you're able to generate from UML diagrams into and back from and everything. And really they provide a really good stack for that. It really is kind of people do say Visual Studio is one of the best IDEs out there. And I definitely agree.
Really?
Definitely,
wow.
Because of the sheer fact that they've had it around for so long, and they control the whole stack it needs to be on, and then they can change it, and they do change it, for what we need, like what people need.
I guess as well. Sorry, you segueing here, but I remember having this conversation with you, and you were talking about this YouTube video you watched on Bill Gates defending paying programmers to build software rather than relying on the open source community, and I guess they've had a lot of paid programmers to build.
And they do listen, and they do listen to feedback as well. That's one thing I'm quite surprised on. With all of them, you do hear there's a reason why this came in, because people wanted it and stuff. So yeah, it's quite a cool.
And it doesn't crash every 2 seconds.
No, it doesn't. Unfortunately, it's quite so. I mean, again, if you just want to write C# programs, you don't have to use Visual Studio or Windows. You could write on the Mac OS X box or a Linux box or an derivative using Mono. So there is an option to do that, and actually there is options to write Android apps and Android and iOS apps in C#.
Right.
With the Mono project, it actually runs on there, so you can use this cool language instead of using Java. I'm only joking. No, but there is one cool thing actually I'd like to talk about. Following on from that, it's called extension methods.
Tell me more.
Tell me more. Did he have a car? Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
So in the world of Scala, there was this big thing where they kind of did this idea, and it was called Pimp My Library.
Yeah.
And Pimp My Library does sound really weird, but actually it makes complete sense to what it does. So as soon as you've got a class like user, oh no, actually the best one I kind of come across is the LINQ, and we'll talk about LINQ in a minute, but like their use case was LINQ. So assume now LINQ is just, so you have your lists and you have a collections class, and LINQ then provides you with these extra methods on those things. Now, the way you could go about it, obviously, was they had the default, list, linked list and stuff like that, and they had all these collections. Now, you could extend that, say this is now a LINQ list instead, and then you'd have to replace all them and stuff like that. And you build up this other class, pretty much structure. But that would be quite messy.
Yes.
And it would be a lot of refactoring for people, and it would be quite confusing to maintain these two branches then of it. So the idea of extension methods is, in essence, it allows you to extend and add methods to concrete classes, or just to classes, at runtime or at compile time. So you could say, that I want, so what you can do with like the LINQ stuff is say you've got your collection, so I've got my LINQ list. I really want to use the LINQ stuff. You just say, I want to use system.link as well, and all the methods that LINQ define actually then are added, extended onto the class.
Okay.
This allows you then to deal with the problem of, like sometimes you don't need to use LINQ, so you don't need to include it.
Yeah.
And it allows you to have this. I think it's easier to kind of see it when you see it. You're like, this is quite cool because it allows you to build up, decorate. It's decorating really. It's saying, I'd like this bit as well because say in the sense of like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Maybe like like users. So in some context is with a user. Maybe you want them to have methods to add images. Now, do you want them to always add images? Because maybe in another part of the system, they're just a bog standard user. It'd be quite cool to have just the user base class and an extension methods for this user now can add images, and you just include that in, and then these methods are almost compiled in as well with it at that time. Probably a really bad example, but that kind of pimping my library allows you to do this, and it's kind of weird to be able to. And also, you can do this and another cool thing is you can do this for any class. So and that's another thing. Any class, say like the string class, or integers, or value, because obviously in CSharp they're all base class of object, even if you're a value type or anything. Say now integers, I want to have a .times method. For some reason, and I can pass it in with .times and then, another number. Obviously you could extend integer and have this is my cool integer, the extend integer, but this way you can actually extend it yourself. So classes that don't belong to you can then actually include extension methods in.
Okay.
And decorate these classes with your own stuff. There's quite a few cool kind of like, ways you can use that.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds quite interesting.
And then I suppose that kind of goes on to LINQ.
I feel like I've heard of LINQ, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's got a really awful name, actually. It's called Language Integrated Query.
Right.
Bit messy. It was made by this, I can't remember his name fully, it's Eric something, and he's very much into the functional stuff. He did actually a course with on Coursera, a Scala course, Reactive Scala, I think it was, Reactive Programming, RP, which is pretty cool. And so with the invention in C# of type inference, and that's another thing actually. So another thing with Scala I found was, with Java, if I define I want a string, I have to say string foo equals and then the string,
Yeah.
Or array list users equals a new array list.
Yeah.
Now that's
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that at all, of course, because all this duplication of code. The compiler could infer that itself, and by inference it means I'm going to make a logical guess that you really want this to obviously be of that type as well. In Scala it does it with vals and vars. Vals are finals, and then vars are you can replace the immutable variables. In Java you have var. Oh, not sorry. In C# you have var, and you can say, "Oh, this is just a var," and it will know, and it will infer the fact that that should be that. It's just a nice bit of sugar, syntactic sugar. It also is able to do like stuff like array type inference. So stuff like, normally you do the kind of thing like this is real arrays where you do, I want int array, so int, and then you do your square brackets.
Yeah.
Numbers equals new int, brackets, and then you'd open up your curly braces and then do all the stuff. In Java, you could do var no, not Java, sorry. In C# you can do var numbers equals new, open and close square brackets, and then just supply integers into that actual thing, and it would infer saying, oh, I know you're only of that type. I know you've only got those types. I'll make it that. But
presumably it would screw up then if you had different object types in that.
Yeah,
that array,
it would know, because, and it would be the same thing, exactly the same as what, if you were to specify it yourself, because it'd be like, well, you started off, with an integer, but then you're trying to go into, say, like adding a user. So what you're doing, what you're doing. But, so LINQ kind of allows you then to use these things with lambdas and stuff and provides you kind of this API of being able to manipulate collections in a functional way. And so it's very similar to stuff in Scala where you have things like mapping. So, you map over, and you'll see it in PHP, like array map, you have an array and you map it over this function, or you map this function over this array, and, it converts it, has these transformation effects.
Yeah.
And so with LINQ, it kind of went down the route of database style naming conventions, such as like select, where. So say you've got like a collection of users and you want to say .where, and then you pass it in a lambda, or you could pass it in a method of actual function. But, lambdas are nice because they're just inline, nice looking functions, anonymous functions. And you say, look, where, and then you say, look, where dot, and then you say like, the first character is equal to something, and that's a function. And it will, provide it with a Boolean value. But all this inference is, and you'll look at a LINQ code and you'll be like, well, that's crazy because now it's looking dynamic, but actually it's not. It is still typed language. It's just because it's inferring a lot of stuff from the context that you're using it at, which is very cool. And then you may .select and then only select, them all in uppercase or something funky.
So Scala allows you to do similar stuff with
Scala Java. Allows you to do exact same, and it does it nicer because Scala's got much better name. Because the nice thing about LINQ is it follows the SQL, this database SQL route, and it allows you then to do stuff like SQL, link to SQL. So it allows you then to run these queries, and it actually interprets and creates these SQL queries for you and runs them into the database and stuff, which is quite cool.
So it is kind of removing some of the strictness, I guess, which is what.
Not really, because it's still keeping it, because it compile time, it has to be still typed.
Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough.
It's just giving the developer an easier life, because I think looking at all these types can get so confusing. Sometimes it's nice just to have a bit of code. And obviously you can provide it with the types if you want to be more readable at that time. I suppose but you could say, then because what you're doing then is you're taking away, and then it's kind of people have to infer it and implicit, sometimes it's nice to be explicit about something instead of just imply that something happens.
Yeah.
But then it does provide a really nice kind of efficient way of doing things. And yes, but saying that, Java Streams does the exact same thing. So in Java 8, you can use these things called streams. And they're like similar to what you have in Scala as streams, and they allow you then to do stuff like where and for each and all this stuff on them. So you're doing very similar things to what's happening in LINQ, because Java 8 has lambdas as well now, so it provides a nice way of doing it. And it also has its inference there as well. So nowadays you can do both. I'll put in the show notes, there's a cool, if you are a Scala guy or know a little bit of a Scala more, or actually even just JavaScript, because JavaScript uses a lot with maps and flat maps and for eaches and reduces and all that stuff. There's a cool link I've got, which is it compares the Scala version with the LINQ version. I do prefer the Scala version, but it's cool that LINQ provides it out of the box really, and obviously you get the tooling and everything into Visual Studio, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
And then there's another one actually, which is weird. I found this in Scala as well. It's called operator overloading. You do it in C++ as well.
Yes.
So you can actually overload, so in something like Scala, I suppose actually, no, this is also a case in C++, C# as well. I'll talk about it, So as everything's an object, when I say, 1 plus 1, what that actually is doing is the one object, I'm doing dot plus. So I'm actually using the plus on that first one object and supplying as an argument that other one. Okay. And then inside that method, the parameter I've got of it. So I'm overriding the fact that plus now is special to me, which is kind of cool, because then what it allows you to do is, say in the case of like an array, I want to append to an array. Yeah. Now you could do something like, well, if you say plus to me, I know to add those two arrays together. It has context of that. No. But it gives it in a nice way. But then it saves you from having to do dot append or dot add, you can in Scala code you do see some weird, funky stuff because you can do this kind of crazy infix stuff and. Everything.
So you'd have to explicitly say, okay, take this operator, and if it's used, do this, or you get certain things out the box.
So some things kind of take advantage of it, but you can actually. Joe Watkins did it for PHP.
Did he? Well, I can't criticise that.
He made like the ability to operator overload in PHP, which is kind of cool, which allows you then to do this. So it pretty much, again, it's the whole idea that if it makes sense for your library, one of the things actually, that they do is a rational number.
Right.
So, like a fraction, 1/2 or something like that. Now, that is a number to me and you.
Yes.
And you can add it, minus it, do all that stuff with it. But obviously it's not actually a value type. You could make it a value type, or it's not, we don't know how to minus it or plus it. So what you can do is create this, class, or struct, whatever you want to do with it, and then say, look, if you try and add a number to this, I'm then going to do it. So it allows you then, I think it's being more expressive in your code and being more intent of what you mean, because I know .add, you could do .add, but sometimes it makes more sense to be using the actual mathematical add infix of it.
Mm. Yeah, I'm not sold on that.
Really?
But, well, I don't know. It sounds a bit messy to me. Like, it's just giving more potential for abuse. But
isn't that fun? We're hackers, we enjoy it, It's like...
Yeah, I guess I'd have to have a play with it before I criticise, I guess. But, I mean, the one good thing that's come out of this podcast is just you finally admitting that Java's better than C-Sharp. I mean, that's all I wanted to hear. That's all I've been waiting for. So
I think this has been definitely a ramble podcast. I can't really think.
I think it's been fairly structured, to be honest with you. I think obviously you talked quite nicely about C-Sharp. I didn't know anything about it really, other than you told me syntactically it's quite similar.
That's one thing I'd like to give. Yeah, if you know Java, then C-Sharp, getting into it is very similar. Other than one thing, their naming conventions are, we use sturdy case where not sturdy case, we use camel case where, we say like get instance, and the lower G would be a lowercase. In there, they use sturdy case for everything, so it would be get instance and it would be capitals. So get would be a capital, G. Yeah, it's really weird. I don't like it. It's very VB, but you get used to it, but I don't like it.
It's only because it's not what I'm used to, I guess. It's like, if you've never known any different.
I used to go, I was like, I'm snake case all the way. But then obviously in the PSR standards, they were like, you should use camel case. And I'm like, okay, I'll use camel case. And I got fine with that. Now it's like, oh God, you have to use this. So yeah, what I end up doing is just using a bit of both. Bit of everything, in one thing, So capitals with underscores and maybe a couple of camel cases in there. And it, makes for a good set of variables for someone to use afterwards.
I guess I do have one more question, actually. I remember a guy that was teaching us about Java, one of the lecturers, he did say that some of the packages have become quite a mess in Java.
Java.util.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got a link actually that I want to explain. This is in the Java docs, the official thing, what they say the package Java.util does. Okay. So this contains the collections framework, legacy collection classes, event model, date and time facilities, internationalization, and miscellaneous utility classes, a string tokenizer, a random number generator, and a bit array. Now,
I see nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
I mean,
that
definitely separation of concern. I mean, they definitely are like, everything. They really did. We all have a util or a functions, we used to, back in the day, you'd have an include with all your functions in, and it would just be a mess of all the stuff that, you just like, I can't find a way to place for this. This is kind of what they've done. I personally think you should never ever use the word utilities.
You don't?
No, because it will always be.
It's too general.
Because I can always put something in it, can't I?
Yeah.
I know that's quite a bold claim, but you shouldn't, because you could put anything in utilities. Everything's a utility. I mean, we've just said it. Date and time facilities are utility, but then to be fair, I think actually I think they've cleaned that up in Java 8 because they've made a better date time class in Java 8. But I don't know. And I don't like legacy collection libraries. So in utilities, the collection library exists there. Like ArrayList and stuff.
How do you think it got so out of control then?
You know what? It's the similar thing to why we got needle and haystack, and then we've got str and s. Like in PHP.
Yeah.
Big projects, different people's views, and they just got to get it, kind of what it is. And I think this is the thing to take away from everything. Again, like, when we were talking about before, like, you know, it's not the programming language, it's how you use it.
Yeah.
But also, every programming language is going to have a wart or a problem, you know, and another program will come out. And the reason why you know, because what happens is Scala came out after Java, but it's because it saw all the stuff that Java did wrong in Quotas.
Exactly.
So you can't really compare, like, and say, oh, your language is better than mine. It's like, well, we're all trying to help each other to make a better language.
But I think where I was leading with my question, though, was in C#. Is it a similar case?
No,
because they must have had years to reflect.
They've got like a collections, like, you know, proper namespace and everything, which is kind of nice. They're far more structured in that way.
Whereas Java is stuck basically with that.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, backwards compatibility, isn't it? It always goes down to BC. You can't break it once you've released a especially with something like Java. You can't say, oh yeah, we're just going to rename this stuff now. It's like, whoa, thousands of millions and billions of pounds is going to be, you know, wasted or spent now to have to refactor code. Legacy code.
I mean, could you see a way that they could actually deal with that and start to split it up without screwing up?
Not really, because I mean, only because now when they introduce new things, they do it the right way. You know, so they're like adding in, you know, so it's like they're saying the legacy collection classes, but really they're not they're legacy. They're not going to be deprecated, but they're the old, you know, like naming of them and stuff. So you can then, when you add more. I mean, the one thing that we did talk about with Phil last week, and this kind of shifts onto PHP, is PHP has a prime, like, they have the greatest opportunity to fix their API, really.
Yeah.
And there's Dennis in the corner, and I love it. Bless him. And, you know, they have the prime example because they're able to do this like pseudo object thing, you know, so they're able to kind of say, look, we actually get to decide now what the namings are.
Yeah.
So they get the decision at the moment. And I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah. Oh, another thing, another thing is in C#, events are first class citizens. So it's weird. So you actually have the event keyword.
Yeah.
So, you know, say like, you can fire off events and stuff, and you can say like, oh, a user was added. And then, you know, you've got your publish and subscribe model, you know, so I publish this event and all my subscribers, they get that event. So maybe when my users, added, you know, I want it to add it to I may want to send them an email. So that's an event that gets attached to it, but they don't know about who's kind of, it's decoupling those kind of situations. Maybe you want to send an email, maybe you want to log something, or etc., or send it off to another API. In C#, the events are actually a keyword, and you can actually include them out the box. With Java, you have to have another package and stuff to do that. And I think that's another thing with C# and with the .NET framework is they provide you with like an object relational mapper, like Entity Framework, out the box already, which is kind of the de facto one. I know they've got like nhibernate, and like Hibernate in the Java world is kind of their object relational mapper, but yeah, it's interesting. I think you can definitely say that they're both very similar, that they're both, you know, parallels between the two. If you ask me what language I would prefer to program in, honestly, I would say C#.
Java.
I would say C#. Oh God, I would say C#. I almost choked on myself there, just thinking about the idea of that would be but I would say C#, but only because they've had the opportunity to probably correct some things. And but I'm happy to be pretty wrong. I don't hate any language. Like, I've learnt now, don't hate on languages.
Yeah, just do it the right way. And they're there to solve a problem. And don't, also another thing I would say, don't fall in love with languages. Like, just women.
Women. Well, you know, obviously, or men, you know, whatever, you know, you know, or walls, or, you know, like the Berlin Wall. Someone was about that. I don't really know.
If we said wolves, not wolves,
yeah, like dire wolves and stuff. Yeah, fall in love with that.
Do not approve of living wolves in the show. Let's get that out there.
Dear. Yeah, no love to animals. That's right. But yeah, so my kind of 2 cents on this is really, be free and flow with your languages. You know, like you're gonna be in, you know, this language for a couple of years or so. Move to another language, try it out. You know, you're always going to learn. I always found, this is one thing I have found, every language that I've ever looked at, I've learned something from.
I completely agree. I feel like, you know, I'm a better programmer from learning Java. I mean, I still suck, but I suck less now that I've learned another language.
But this is the thing, because you learn these new principles, and you can now see the direction why PHP was going in that direction with object-oriented stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, even stuff like classic ASP, there's things that I've learned from it. So, one of them is not to have case-insensitive variables, but, you know, like that's only the negative of it.
Well, I'm going to go away this weekend and fix this whole java.util package thing. I'm just going to sort out Oracle. They've had an absolute battering.
Go into your IDE, right? Yeah, and just do a refactor, just a full-on refactor of the source. You know,
I'm going to put 2 hours aside. I'm just going to sort it all out, and then
and you'll be golden. ASP.NET.
Yes,
I would love to talk about ASP.NET just for 5 minutes.
Sure.
So ASP.NET, a lot of people hate on it. A lot of people do. A lot of people kind of were. When classic ASP kind of died in like 03, because they didn't really, because that was kind of, you could compare that to PHP in a sense, you know, in that kind of scripty vein, you know, where PHP now is kind of growing into its own language as well, you know, more structured professional language. You know, it still has the roots of that scripting language. But so in 03, you know, people were like, oh, classic ASP's gone and everything. And then it was this whole idea that ASP.NET, and that was going to be the thing, you know, the .NET framework and using CSharp or VB.NET and this massive bloated, in quotes, framework. Now, I think the thing about ASP.NET though, and I had these kind of negative, like they you know, is I really like ASP.NET. I really do. They've got, the thing I'd like to say about it is they've got 3 specific ways of making web applications. The one that's probably most familiar with is web forms. And that was like kind of their idea that they have view state and all these kind of weird things to be able to mimic the look of, like, you know, we were able to drag and drop web forms in Win forms and stuff, and being able to, you know, make it look like it's pretty much desktop application developers could then make web applications without really any kind of problems. But to be fair, it turns out they're very different beasts. So, you know, that didn't really work. So they're still around. You can do web forms and stuff, but you can also use stuff called web pages and Razor. Now, web pages and Razor are exactly the same as what PHP is. You can inline. You do the same thing. You make scripts the same as you do in PHP, but in C-sharp. So pretty much you could use web forms and Razor using the C-sharp language, is a very nice language, exactly the same way as you would do PHP.
Interesting.
Which is very cool. And then obviously they've got their own MVC framework.
Yes.
Which is cool because then it's the de facto one, obviously. I know there is competition, actually. There are other, because there's like an open standard for developing for these things. But yeah, then they have their MVC, so you can use that as well. So there's 3 different ways you can do it. You can use the old way web forms. You can do web pages for Razor if you want quick, simple applications, or if you've coming from a PHP background where you've kind of like that way, or you can do MVC. And also then they have the single page applications, the SPAs, and they actually provide Knockout.js out of the box and stuff. And sorry, another thing is, I know Java, they have stuff like Maven, which is kind of their like dependency manager kind of thing. Which is like it's kind of like their task kind of, I think I've got that right. With good old ASP, with C-sharp, they've got something called NuGet, and that's like their composer and their, you know, Ruby gems and stuff like that, and NPM. So that's the way you can then deploy packages and use it like that. So you can still do the same thing. Also, another thing is SignalR, which is so that's event-based programming, similar to Node.js. Okay. Similar to Python's Tornado. So you can actually do stuff like asynchronously. And you can do that in Java as well. There are frameworks out there for it. I think Netty does it. You know, like being able to do like these things that you can do. You see that in the Node examples. But again, SignalR, there's one in good old ASP.NET. And the thing is it's all in one. I mean, I know that kind of is a bad thing, but it's actually quite a nice thing to look at. To see, you know, like, I think... I go by the fact now that I'm like, I hated on ASP.NET because of what other people are saying. Give it a go yourself and then have an opinion, you know, like don't be part of the crowd of what is wrong and what is right, you know, because you're going to like what you like. You know, there's a reason why we all have different likes, you know, like I enjoy, you know, my comments being this way, someone else enjoys their comments being another way, and you know, I enjoy 2 spaces when someone else enjoys 4 spaces. I enjoy tabs versus spaces, all that rubbish. But you know, there's a reason why people, you know, choose different things. But I would say it's very cool. It's very cool.
Can we put a poll on the Free Devs website and people can vote either C# sucks or Java sucks?
I think that would be pretty cool.
Interesting. Obviously, by the time this podcast gets out,
I think in 2017 will be quite a long time away. So yeah, they won't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, joking aside, I'd love to have a play of it sometime, and probably will get you to show me it, some of the features in more depth. But obviously, being a soon-to-be dad, it's quite hard to find the time at the moment. But I'm only joking when I say C# sucks. I really don't know. So I'd love to give it a go sometime. But yeah, I think we've kind of explored both. But I guess the other thing we should say is that, I mean, really, we started this podcast off for beginner programmers, and we sometimes forget about that straight away.
Sorry, guys. This episode has just been a complete. So generics. Why are we talking about generics?
But what I would say that if you know a little bit of PHP, then definitely do not be intimidated by trying a bit of Java, because
or C#.
Or C#. I mean, I would say Java because I think the setup process would be slightly easier, especially if you're a Mac user. But then I've not used Mono. I've no idea. But I would definitely have a play with Java. Especially if you've been doing PHP in the OO way, then you won't find it too far-fetched to get into, to be honest with you. But yeah, give them both a go. And like Ed says, the more languages you learn or just dabble with, you will learn something from each one that you use. So give it a go.
Absolutely. +1 to that.
Yeah. Have we covered everything you wanted to?
I think so, yeah. So, guys, awesome. Been great, guys and girls, or just a guy today. It was just me and Mickey.
Exactly.
Didn't go off the rails too much, but I hope you all have a very good week, and goodbye.
Yeah. And either Merry Christmas or
Happy New Year,
or have a great summer or something.
The apocalypse has happened, and we're all dead.
Goodbye. Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.